Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining the Transflo team today as we talk through the top 3 ways to turn data into safety insights. Now, just because we're talking about the top 3 things doesn't mean there's a lot of other options that we can talk about whenever you deal with Transflo. But today we're going to be focused on 3 specific areas: how we use the data, how we coach our drivers, and how we deliver the data. So all that will be covered in today's webinar. Before we get started with our content, though, a few housekeeping items. Frank, if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide. Thank you, sir. So questions are welcomed and encouraged. This is the most important thing that I'm going to tell you today. The chat is open. Please have questions for us. We'd love to answer those, and we'll get to them at the end of the presentation. A couple ways you can ask questions: there's the Q&A button and in the chat, so please use either one of them. If there's anything that's not covered today or anything that you would like to ask separately, please use the contact@transflo.com to deliver that. And of course, anything that we do today is going to be recorded and a copy will be provided to all of you after. So again, thank you for being here today, and we look forward to the interaction. All right, sir, next one. So what are we going to be covering? We're going to be introducing who our speakers are going to be today. We'll get that in just a second. Snapshot of what we're doing, the data that we're going to be able to pull in, which is just a ton of things that you're going to be able to review. And then how do we take that and actually coach our drivers with it? It's so important to make things that you find in your system actionable, and we'll be doing that today. And then how do we deliver those alerts in the safest way fashion to improve driver performance in real time? It's critical. So we want to make sure that we take our information and turn drivers safer without ever having to talk. So how do we automate some of that? And then the path forward, and then Q&A at the end. So go ahead, Frank, let me introduce our team. Excellent. So I'm Danny Goldstein. I'm the Vice President of Sales Engineering at Transflo. Joining me today is Daniel Lee. He's our SVP of Sales. A year and a half ago, Assured Telematics and Transflo merged, and he's going to be walking through some of the data with you today. We're also very excited to have 2 of our premier partners join us today on the webinar. We have Mauricio Berber, who's the president of Predictive Coach, and we also have John Van Nortwick, who is the sales director for safety solutions for Drivewyze. So thank you both for being here and joining Daniel and I today as we talk through these incredible advancements we're making in the fleet safety. Okay, next slide, please. So why? The first question we always want to understand is the pain point and the problem statement that you're dealing with your fleets. And of course, the number one catastrophic thing that can happen is a wreck, an accident. And so when we're looking at driver behavior, we're looking at a few different things, right? We're looking at efficient fuel use. We're looking at keeping your drivers safe and keeping other drivers safe on the road. And we're definitely looking to avoid accidents. So you'll see a bit of a trend here. From 2022 to 2023, accidents have reduced, and we're on pace for another accident reduction in 2024, with year-to-date accidents around 8,000 trucks. Now, what does that mean? Well, it means that we're getting safer on the roads, which is excellent. And the question is, why? Why are we safer on the roads today? And we hope to answer some of those questions that we go through some of our data and some of our information in our slides. We want to continue this trend. We want to continue keeping your drivers safe. So let's talk a little bit about now, not just the statistics that drive this, but some of the things that we're doing. So next slide, please. All right, data. If you have ever plugged an electronic tracking device into a vehicle, if you've ever used a camera, you know that there are thousands of points of data. Geotab is our ELD partner, and just in fault codes alone, not J1939, they have over 20,000 of them. There's so much data that comes from that truck, from the driver, from the ECM, from the engine, that we need to be able to do something. So it has to go from just raw data to how we report it. So next slide, please. All right, data versus information. And this is a really important distinction. We've kind of talked about this a little bit today already. We have lots of facts, lots of stats, lots of things that you can grab from your fleet. You're already getting all of this. So how do we use it is the number one question that we get here at Transflo is, I have all this information. How can you make it work for me on a day-to-day basis? So, and we're going to talk today about some of the things you probably already know about, some of the things you're already using, some of the things you need, but there should be a lot of information that you want. So whether it comes to exceptions on the rules that you specifically designed for your fleet, or whether it gets down to data that we can grab from the engine, we're always looking to ask that question at the bottom: what makes a difference for you? And we can customize and individualize this data for your fleet. And that's really important as we move forward and talk about how we utilize this. Okay, Next slide for me, please, sir. All right. So the first thing we love to talk about is maintenance and fleet insights. We've already kind of mentioned a little bit. We have that kind of really good engine data that we can provide for you. So what are we getting and what can we do with it? Again, most of us know to track idle time. Most of us know to track device tampering and emissions. And we're going to talk a little bit about predictive versus preventative maintenance. But idle times, I like to always start a little bit there because an idle time is very simple, right? Hey, if my truck's not moving and that engine is on, is that idle time? It is. But we need to be able to layer this data with conditions to make sure we're tracking the most important information when it comes to things like idle time. So do we need to know if the parking brake is on? Do we need to know what gear we're in? All those things are available to combine with just basic idle time tracking to turn all this massive amounts of data into real information that you can use and apply day to day inside of your fleet. So as we go through and as we do this and as we talk about it, please make sure that you guys reach out to us so we can tell you how to turn this information into data. Okay. The next thing we want to talk about is device tampering. Because if you're running a truck over the road, you know that device has to stay plugged in as long as they're driving. So not only can we let you know if a device has been unplugged, that's important, we can let you know the codes that are associated with it. Was there a corresponding odometer jump? This is all the really basic information you're already getting that we can combine with other data points to make things incredibly actionable in the fleet. So as we go through and as we look at this, again, it isn't just one data point alone. It's how we can combine all those data points together to make sure that we get the best information. Okay, emissions. This is something that's on the front corner of everybody's page every single day. We know California is moving towards its CARB certification, so that you have to make sure you're tracking if you're running in California. And we will probably see some of these things move across the country into other states. It may become federal at some point. So what can we do to help drive that information so that you don't have to do it manually? We don't want your drivers pulling their trucks over. We already have this information and we can access it remotely. So make sure you ask us about how we can do that for you. How can we have you the right cables, the right devices to make sure we report this information remotely so that your drivers are no longer required to stop and take away from that valuable driving time? Finally, I want to talk a little bit about predictive versus preventative maintenance. Now, for a long time, most systems have been able to give you preventative maintenance. Hey, I did a service at 100,000 miles. 5,000 miles later, I need to do another one. 10,000 miles later, I need another oil change. Again, we can build that into the system and it's there for you today. But it's the predictive part that's really valuable for fleets. So, and it's more than just, is my check engine light on? Do I have a fault code? Because not everything that happens in a truck is necessarily going to produce a fault code. So we need to make sure that we're giving you the information you need to know before that truck has a breakdown, to know before that truck has issues on the road, so you can make sure your drivers stay productive. When we combine things like safety tracking, utilization tracking, and maintenance tracking, what it does is it increases our ability to be productive on the road. The maximum amount of drive time, the maximum amount of work time, so that you can maximize the money that you're collecting from your fees. So what do we do with those insights? We're going to plan your vehicle maintenance and we're going to be able to predict before a truck breaks down. We're going to know that that check engine light is on. The data tells us like 85% of check engine lights get ignored by drivers. We're going to make sure that never happens again in fleet. How does that utilization work? How do we make sure that you are tracking and be the most efficient you are on the road, and then gain better visibility into all of that information? So when we combine those things together, when we use it, we make you the most efficient fleet on the road. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about the data that we use inside the systems. We'd love to talk a little bit about, and I'm going to bring Daniel Lee in to talk a little bit about cameras and some of the other safety and reporting that comes from this, because just having the data is important, but seeing it and using it is next. So Daniel, thank you for joining us, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Danny. Let's talk a little bit about video telematics, shall we? Some of you might have cameras on board, others are maybe contemplating it, and others might not have it at all. Cameras nowadays have been exponential in growth for today's vehicles and fleets. It's a big growth sector with a lot of companies hopping on board. Cameras measure either distracted driving or driving behavior. Video telematics is essentially on distracted driving. It's defined as driving while doing another activity that takes your attention away from driving, such as taking your eyes off the road, hands off the wheel, cognitive distractions, such as taking your mind off driving. There are some horrible statistics that are a part of the driving behavior that we have to at least review, because it tells a story of how we're going to use the data from video telematics and transferring it into valuable information for you to take action on. The car insurance industry reports about 2.5 million crashes have occurred in an annual basis based on distracted driving alone. There's about 400,000 injuries a year, 60 billion in annual costs. That's vehicle repair, litigation fees, settlements. There is essentially about 78% of the crashes and 65% of the near crashes in the USA had one form of inattention or distraction as a contributing factor. That includes fatigue. Texting, if you're wondering, which we've all heard about, causes right now 1 in 4 crashes. Drivers using a phone, but they fail to see up to 50% of driving environments while they're using the phone. That's also increasing the risk of the crashes. Reaching for an object nowadays increases the chance of a car crash about 8 times. And then here's something to look at. If you've got speeding as an example going on, distracted driving, fatigue, that's a triple threat. If all that's going on, ask yourself, wouldn't it make sense for a company or an organization to gather as much data as they could and then develop a strategy for interpreting the information into valuable policies and action plans to reduce that risk and improve safety and productivity? The video telematics data that's coming in off the cameras provides data for a bigger picture in about 3 areas. The first area is risk assessment. It's going to help you to understand the probability and the likelihood of a driver being involved in an incident or crash. The second, and by the way, metrics about that are now available. It's not just a discovery of what a driver is doing. For example, are they driving, swerving lanes or anything, or following too closely? But it's also, are they missing stop signs? Are they driving through red lights? That information is becoming valuable metrics and analytics for cameras now to have. The second is behavior indicators. Video telematics can look at, are we following too closely? Are we texting? Are we driving drowsy, distracted, or following too closely? The third element of how video telematics is helping with this information is scoring assessments and performance. We'll go into that in a little bit when we examine reports. But one of the advantages of having a wider overall picture of driver risk is that it helps you to more quickly recognize safe driving behaviors and take actions to change the at-risk habits. The data that you're getting, the raw data which drivers needs, that can help you with further coaching when you're going behind the wheel with somebody and you're talking about safe driving habits and reducing that risk. The real game changer right now is how video telematics data and other data is utilized and what action is subsequently taken to address the issues and opportunities raised by the data. Most cameras offer about 1 gigabyte of video data. That's plenty to run a video safety program with your drivers. The raw data that's coming in is used for everything. It gets sent up to the cloud, and then you're able to either stream that information or get it through events. When something happens, I want to find something out immediately, the camera will actually push the data to you, or it can be done through video requests. Something happened, you go back in date and time and look at it. Let's go to the next slide, please. The goal of this all is to determine a crash-free culture with the reporting that you're going to be getting, not only just from the video data, but also from the telematics data that's coming from the ELD, such as from Geotab. You're looking at a bunch of dashboards right now, and the events that are coming off, or the tick marks that are coming off of the cameras and from Geotab, are valuable, enriched data that you can then produce graphs, scorecards, charts, and reports. Everything from harsh braking and cornering to acceleration and speeding. The strategies that you're doing is to essentially create a crash-free culture. You're going to use the data to set baselines and create a program based on those results. You're going to gather this data, look at these reports, and determine where you want to set up, for example, incentive programs. Are you going to be seeking the video telematics data to determine specific problematic drivers? Can you reward the good ones and use automated scorecards to look at trends? Hey, how is my coaching doing? Over time, your graphs, your metrics, your reports can gauge whether or not your programs are headed in the right direction. These charts, these graphs can be looked at over time to determine whether or not scores for drivers are either positive or negative. They can also be weighted over time and also over mileage so as to not bias one driver for driving too much from another. This kind of information, these analytics, can now go into these programs and then can develop anything from notifications in real time to you, to reports that you can look at, to, again, trends over time, to look at reports either through these dashboards or automatically through email reports. We'd love to go ahead and investigate those with you should you want to take a deeper dive into how video telematics is putting this information into usable, resourceful, crash-free cultures of reporting and data that you can deliver for your fleet. Next slide, and back to Danny. This might also be mine. Forgive me. Sorry about that, Danny. Put you on the spot. Yep. So this is an example of what one of the scorecards would be looking like with your data. I know it's tiny to read, but essentially every line is essentially a driver. And as you're looking across, the greens, yellows, and reds are essentially telling you how they're doing in certain categories across the board. It's not about catching someone doing wrong. It's catching someone doing right and then seeing where improvement is needed. Because when you increase the productivity, you increase the efficiency of your workforce by looking at this data. You're reducing the risk, you're reducing the waste, you're looking at these in a minute area, but then you're getting scores from your drivers and then weighing them against each other and then seeing totally where your fleet scores are. Now, in the Geotab application, you have over 150 custom apps that can integrate into the Geotab system to provide you with metrics that can go into scorecards like this. And these are the data points that we take that raw information and then display it into actionable data to use this information to your advantage. Back to you again, Danny.
Definitely back to me this time. Thank you so much, Daniel. And
yeah.
We like to show you the data at the beginning. We like to show you how we capture it, how we use both camera and telematics data to be able to capture that data. But what do we do next? Because our number one goal here is how we coach our drivers. So next slide, please. So again, we need to take all these insights. We need to make sure that we're coaching our drivers in real time as much as possible, but most importantly, making them better every single day. So we're very lucky to have one of our first premier partners here, Mauricio Berber from Predictive Coach. Mauricio, thank you so much for joining us. We'd love to hear a little bit about how Predictive Coach helps keep our drivers safe on the road.
Absolutely. Thanks for that, Danny. And let's go ahead and jump right in. If you could please change the next slide. We'll kick things off with coaching misconceptions. And having served the industry for over 17 years, we've seen some trends come and go. Examples of that could be gamification, scorecards, which I think a lot of organizations or providers have done a great job at providing these scorecards to serve the data beautifully. And then the latest trend that we're noticing is coaching. The coaching word is being thrown around, and coaching can be quite different on different scales, right? Some may say coaching is a beep in the cab. Others may say it's an audible alert in the cab, and others may say it's scorecard. But at the end of the day, or even video clips, right? At the end of the day, all of those things, I don't think did a good enough job of keeping in mind the end user, the management who have to manage the drivers, and even the drivers who are experiencing the actual behavior changes, right? The effort to do so. One of the things that we've done is we actually gone back to the drivers themselves and surveyed them and asked them, like, what are these different methods of driver safety? What do they do to you on a regular basis? We start with the beep in the cab. The feedback we got from a lot of drivers is that it's annoying. It's just the beep in the cab. They either tune it out or figure out a way to turn it off. And so it's really not effective. The other one is an audible coaching in the cab, right? Something that's telling you, hey, you got to slow down, you got to pay attention, or whatever the case may be. drivers, we like to refer to that as the startle factory here at Predictive Coach, because in surveying those drivers, we found that a lot of them were finding that the technology was sometimes delayed and or they were having some false positives. But at the end of the day, if it is delayed and or had a false positive, the driver was getting startled, and which caused anxiety and or frustration. And then the other one, of course, when we talk about scorecards, no doubt there's a benefit in having scorecards where the data is served beautifully. I think some places do a better job than others at serving that data in those scorecards. But it still requires for managers to take onus on what's happening and what data they're getting on those scorecards and being able to act on that data, right? The theme here is data, 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 but we have to take action on it. Now, when we introduce video clips, which there's no doubt the video is essential. It's a really quick way to exonerate a company. It's a really great way to take away shaky witness testimony and save ourselves a lot of time in court, right? However, at the end of the day, when we look at what it is at its core, it is a lot of data coming in. And now we're talking about clips that are 10, 15, 20 seconds long that are going to continue to pile up. And if we don't take action on those videos, we're setting ourselves up for a bad situation, such as a bad nuclear verdict, which has, exploded in the last few years. And we can talk about that another time, but it's just not having the documentation showing that we're taking proactive action on the data. So if you could go to the next slide, please. So let's examine the common causes of failure, right? When we look at what exists today and why a lot of organizations fail to have a successful driver safety program, it simply has to do with bandwidth and time. When we look at what's happened over the last couple decades on driver training, it hasn't changed much. The only thing that's changed from the old driver training methods is that it's gone digital. But at the end of the day, it's still long, boring, generic, and very reactive. Not to mention, it also puts the onus on managers to take action. Now, if we look at a day in the life of a manager, right, we look at the fact that they already have a lot of things to do throughout the day. So they're wearing a whole bunch of hats, and they mean well. They mean to actually take action on the data, but reality hits and there's a fire that needs to be put out. So safety gets put in the back burner because they have to focus on revenue generating tasks and focus on things that they have control of right now. And so safety ends up taking a back seat most often, right? But if you look at a scenario where a manager is actually doing a good job and they're doing their darn best to try to keep and stay on top of the data they're receiving, the process is very painful and time consuming. If I was to identify a driver today as a manager, I have to go pull in the report, look at my data, then pull my driver in, right? Look at my LMS, try to pull a driver training that's somewhat related to the behavior that I identified, assign it to the driver, chase the driver around to make sure that they did it. Finally, after they completed it, document that. And before you know it, that's taking up quite some time. Now scale that to a few locations or hundreds of drivers throughout the day, and there are hundreds of clips that you have to look at, and it becomes very difficult for management to be successful in that end, right? So at the core of it all, time becomes the biggest enemy to being able to make a safety program successful and being able to implement things consistently across the board throughout the organization. Next slide, please. So having served a large number of customers and being able to sit in front of them and ask them things such as, when was the last time you put a speeding report? These are the data that's often overlooked is the speeding, hard braking, hard acceleration, hard cornering. Again, going back to the fact that managers wear many hats and they're getting pulled day in, day out to do different tasks, right? But the interesting part is when we actually pull a prospect and we ask them when was the last time you pulled a speeding report? They often say, I haven't done it in a while. So let's pull one up right now. And the shock that they get from seeing the numbers from either speeding or hard braking, because organizations are all different, they're in shock. That's when they realize, oh my gosh, this is a problem. We need to fix it. But again, going back to the fact that they've been so highly focused on tasks that are revenue generating that they neglected to understand or really neglected to really look at the fact that aggressive driving that is happening in the organization, that the data is showing them, is equal to loss of revenue. Because when you have aggressive driving, you're impacting your fuel, your tires, your brakes, your maintenance, and of course your reliability when you have a lot of incidents happening. But that's a daily impact on the actual revenue that the organization is going to experience. So if the focus is on revenue generating tasks on this side, but on the other side, we're losing a lot of revenue because of the inefficiency and the aggressive driving, then we're spinning our wheels, right? So how do we take this painful process of having to do all of this work and having to assign it to drivers and stay on top of our safety program while still executing our daily task and putting out fires. The next slide, please. I'll show you how we're doing it at Predictive Coach. The beauty of today, the world that we live in, is that convenience is king. Convenience is so important. If you look at yourself as a consumer, what you appreciate most about any type of service, such as FedEx or Amazon, is that convenience of being able to have it right there, easy to do, hit the easy button. And that's really what we're bringing to the table. The convenience of being able to say, here are the keys to the kingdom. XYZ company, what is your risk tolerance for speeding, for hard braking, for acceleration? The answer might be, hey, you know what? For our organization, we allow 3 speeding infractions per driver per day, 3 hard brakes, 2 accelerations, 1 seatbelt. Whatever the case may be, we set that into the system, and then we let it run. And the beauty of it is that by being able to provide micro trainings and identifying the behavior and addressing the behavior right when it happens, is similar to a situation where you get a speeding ticket. And I like to use that scenario because it's very much highly effective, right? If you get a speeding ticket today and you get pulled over, the first thing that's going to happen once the officer hands you that little piece of accountability in the form of a citation is that you're going to look at how much it's going to cost, $250. Now I'm going to probably have to take a 8-hour remedial course so that it doesn't count on my insurance, right? No, I don't get any points. But also I'm going to slow down. What's most important, I'm going to slow down for the rest of the day, the rest of the week, the rest of the month, maybe the rest of the year, because I don't want to get points on my record. The same thing happens if we have a situation where, for example, Danny is up late on Sunday, and then he gets up on Monday, he gets up late. Now he's rushing throughout the day trying to get make up time. But by 9:05, he's already broken his 3 allowable speeding infractions for the day. So immediately at 9:05, he gets a notification that says, Danny, you've been assigned this micro training course on speeding, and you have 7 days to complete it, right? Then the 2 things happen. 1, Danny's going to slow down for the rest of the day, the rest of the week, maybe the rest of the month, but he's also going to do one more thing that's very essential to the success of the program. He's going to talk to his buddies. Hey, now they're making us do these little training courses on the specific to the behavior that we're seeing, and they're not fun, right? So what ends up happening is they talk to each other, and the company as a whole starts to experience a dramatic drop in bad driver behavior. So the convenience that we're delivering here now is being able to gather all the data, take all that painful workload and automating it so that managers can still focus on their revenue generating tasks and all the fires they got to put out while their safety program is on point. And all they have to do is go into a dashboard on the Geo tab to be able to see how many courses were assigned, how many are past due. And one that we were very specific on creating here is the ignored courses. That carries a lot of weight because in a space where a manager can eliminate the painful process of having to bring somebody in for face-to-face conversation, now we're automating that process, right? But in the case where notifications have been sent to that driver and he's not taking those courses, they do get notified and say, hey, you're about to have this course go into the ignored category. And that in itself carries a ton of weight, and it actually causes drivers to take action and take care of these courses. Now, think about how much tension we've removed from the overall experience of coaching drivers, not only on the workload side, but often we got feedback from managers that the reason why they didn't want to coach drivers is because it was painful, it's awkward, and it created tension. The last thing I want to do is upset my drivers because they're expensive to replace. So I'm just going to have to put my head in the sand and hope that nothing happens. Today, the actual coaching is as simple as, hey, you got a notification to complete this course. Can you please take care of it before it's past due? And now you have a beautiful way to look at a pulse on your safety without having to even contact your drivers. So next slide, please. So by automating everything, we're allowing for the consistency to take place. So whether your drivers are scattered throughout the country and you have different management styles, different managers, the delivery of the training will be the same. That means that our data and our approach will now see race, age, or gender, or any of those things. And so we can apply the same type of coaching and it'll be as effective no matter where you are in the country. Lastly, having served different industries, we did take a lot of nuggets as to what makes a safety program successful. And this is what helped us create what we have here in automation. But truly, if you didn't have automation, a living driver safety program where you're always staying on top of the new techniques, and for example, automation is important. It's super important to keep it. So comprehensive training and education that's always ongoing is paramount. The other thing is data-driven monitoring and feedback. You have to be in a proactive stance. If you caught in a reactive stance, which often we see happening with organizations where they say, I gave them a training 2 months after an incident happened or 2 weeks, that looks really bad in court, and that sets you up for a really nasty settlement in the nuclear verdict space. And then lastly, it's strong safety culture and leadership commitment. It has to come from the top, but the way we deliver a program like this has to be understood by everybody in the organization. That is not a slap in the wrist. It is more a team effort to keep everybody employed, to make everybody come home safe at the end of the day, which we often take for granted, and to be able to say, hey, we have a pulse on our safety program. We're putting people over profits instead of profits over people, and we care about the safety of the public and the safety of our drivers. So at the end of the day, we're protecting the brand, the drivers, and the bottom line. Back to you, Danny.
Thank you so much, Mauricio. We really appreciate you coming on and talking about that. Thank you. Luckily, Transflo has another premier partner that we get to introduce you to today. So John Van Nortwick is the sales director again at Drivewyze for their safety solutions. So John, thank you for joining us, and tell us how we can make our drivers safer with Drivewyze, please.
Absolutely. I love this because this is what I talk about. There's, we have safety alerts, and we can do all sorts of great industry-wide alerts for our customers, low bridges, National Weather Service. We can provide those weather alerts, but it's your fleet data that really we can start to narrow down on what your specific issues. So utilizing and leveraging all that great data that Transflo is offering, and then the coaching that you have after the fact, and then we can augment that with proactive coaching. So whether it's reminding a driver about a coaching item that he had, or taking that same kind of common area problem and getting in front of it and talking to the next driver that comes into that location. So if you go to the next slide, I can talk about how that kind of works and tell you a little bit more about Drivewyze. So it's all about geofence. So ours is all location-based, proactive communication with the driver. So the Drivewyze bypass product, kind of our flagship product, does that. It does the same process. That's what we build it on. So as a driver's coming up to a way station 2 miles out, they get a warning that they're coming on a way station, giving them plenty of time to get over to the right lane. So we start our safety journey there by just being safe about the way stations. And then as they get to the 1 mile fence, we let them know whether they need to pull in or if they get a bypass because they've got a good CSA score and move on. Our safety alerts work the same way. So you're coming up on a risky area well before that location to give you a lot of time. We give a nice little chime, so it's not annoying the driver. It's a sign that they're used to. It's a yellow alert sign, a warning them of a risk zone coming up, and then we track their driver through that. So depending on the type of risk zone, we'll track their behavior and their speed as they go through that risk zone. So the geofence processes are the same for all of our products. Go ahead to the next slide. And then I just wanted to touch on that the alerts work. So we partner with a lot of state DOTs, a lot of very large carriers. They're not going to partner with us, and they provide some of these services, especially for our free product. They provide these, they pay for them to be available to our common customers, and they test the data. So with North Carolina, we tested some of the different slowdown alerts. 11 mile per hour reduction compared to the drivers that aren't getting alerts. Hard braking reduction, and 70% of the drivers slowing down through work zone. So just the basic alert works with no additional coaching, no additional overhead for the fleet to manage the alerts work. So just wanted to make sure we covered that. Go to the next slide. So again, I talked about the industry-wide area. So we're providing those low bridge alerts. We looked at ATRI data for the high rollover areas. So we're warning drivers if there are steep grades, we're going to give you those kind of areas. And then with Safety Plus, we add weather. So we're pulling NOAA's weather service every minute to get you up-to-date weather service, and when applicable, providing that to the driver as he approaches a weather pattern. Speed, we're looking at the VICMIS data, and you'll see the CSA as an industry, and looking at the common speeding areas, warning your drivers about those so they can be aware of those to make sure they watch their speed. And then cargo theft, we're getting feeds from CargoNet to provide drivers warnings when they're in a risky area that's got some cargo things. And then if you want to go to the next slide. But what about your specific things? So what about that pull outside of your customer's terminal or any specific issue that your fleet? That's where we can build in those custom alerts that are specific to your fleet, leveraging the Transflo data, your video safety data. And just go ahead and go to the next slide. It'll kind of show you how that works. So this is just kind of a little screen grab to show you how simple it is. You give you what type of it is so you can do your reporting. It's drag and drop geofences. So Where do you want to give the driver an alert? If you do want to monitor his speed as he goes through that area, you can do that. Type in the message. We keep it down to a small certain number of characters so that it's not distracting for the driver to look at that alert. But it's literally takes a couple minutes once you get used to it to create an alert and publish it. So if you go to the next slide. So anything that you come up with. So we were looking at all sorts of different data from your fleet that Transflo can provide, or maybe it's a customer service, but it could be as simple as just giving the driver that confidence as he comes to a new location. How does he need to enter that location? You know, the entrance is on the left when you get up there, or got some customer service issues at this location. Our drivers are going a little fast as they come through there. We can give them a reminder on the speed. And this could be something that maybe you know, if it's a speeding issue that you've already done with Predictive Coach, now I can come back in and I can remind the driver before that happens, or the next driver that comes to that location, that we want to watch our speed as we approach that, you know, that through that neighborhood that's going into our customer site, or whatever the situation might be. I want to go to the next slide. So CSA data is another element that we like to look at for different issues that we can help fleets specifically, you know, bring down their CSA. So lane restrictions around the Atlanta area is a common area. So that's the kind of thing. And these are just, you know, to give you examples of different ways you can utilize that data. We have a lot of predatory towing out there. I was just in a conference yesterday where people were talking about, you know, 6-figure towing bills because they, you know, once they're trapped, they get those tow bills come and they're forced to pay them. But you can block off those areas where those you know, there's no parking, and remind drivers to be careful. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So we've had several of our customers that utilize video safety, and they have a safety score, and they look at the common areas by a location rather than driver, because you can kind of get in a rut where you're coaching driver and there's some turnover, you're coaching a new driver, or a new driver comes into that area. Now I coach him. Now I can get in front of that a little bit. These are common areas that all of our drivers are having issues with. Let's give them a proactive warning as they come into that area and remind them that there's, you know, it's a common speeding area, or it's a common harsh brake area. So we can utilize that information. Or if I'm looking at my, you know, cargo damage data, I can see that there's some opportunities to remind drivers that at this specific site, with the type of cargo that we're pulling, we got to be extra careful with how we load that trailer, and make sure that they're aware of those as they go through those. If you want to go to the next slide. And again, with the CSA data, we had one of our customers that all of a sudden was getting some tire violations at a specific weigh station. You know, was using the new InMotion tire sensor, so it can check those tires. And so they just put a custom zone 2 exits ahead, had the drivers pull over, double check their tires, make sure that those were all clean. And then as they go through there, they eliminated that issue with tire violations at that specific location. And we can work with customers to identify those CSA data. We help them drill into those location-based information. Do you want to go to the next slide? So you mentioned maintenance data. So one of our customers noticed in their maintenance data, they're a big training fleet, that they were burning through brakes. And it was, you know, they go through our data, and they could identify that there was 81% of the steep grade speeding issues were happening at just 3 passes. So using that data, again, utilizing that data to kind of that 80-20 rule, where 80% of your problems come from 20% of the locations or from the drivers, you can really drill into that. And they were able to provide additional alerts using our custom zones. We already have steep grade alerts that are built in, but they were able to create additional alerts that remind them of what coaching that they've already had about how to handle it and what to do as they get up to a break. A lot of times the newer drivers it's too late when they start engaging the Jake brake, and they're already over the pass. So again, reinforcing that coaching, reinforcing that information that they're getting through the other areas with a proactive location-based communication is kind of what we're all about. Go to the next slide. I think that's all I had.
Thank you so much. We appreciate that. Great information.
Yep.
And a great way to keep our drivers safe on the road. So we have a little bit of time left here at the end. So are there any questions that we can answer today? So first question, looks like we have someone ask, how can we make this technology work together? Great question. So because of our strategic partnerships, these are built into our systems already. So when you come to Transflo and you need Drivewyze plus Predictive Coach plus the cameras plus anything, we can make it an interactive system where they all work with each other. So it makes it really, really simple to implement and use in your system. So thank you so much. That's a great question. Awesome. Well, have case studies you can provide? Absolutely. When we're done, if you want to reach out individually to the contact@transflo.com, we have case studies from Drivewyze, from Predictive Coach, from Transflo cameras, as many of those as you want. And we are always actively engaged with our clients to speak to new clients. So if there's anything else that you need to know or anything you want to get information from directly from people who are using our system, we'd love to pass that on to you. Next question, can we pilot this before purchase? Of course. We would love to give you a show and tell exactly how this works. So Daniel, maybe you could talk a little bit about how we can help people use our system before they decide to buy it.
Yeah, pilots are really a natural step in testing and making sure that everything is correct and is up to the standards that you would want as an organization to run with this technology. So we invite pilots. We'll take them certainly on a case-by-case basis to make sure the goals and objectives that you're setting forth are going to be ones that would be achievable from both sides. And at the same time, we'll also serve as a conscientious ambassador of the technology for you as a consultant, a true consultant. With all of the technology that is integrating within the hubs of, for example, a GeoTab, we are at Transflo taking a line of like Switzerland, whereby we're neutral. We'll tell you the good, bad, and ugly, and making sure that you're aware of what the nuances are of certain technologies. We don't play favorites, but we will provide you with options and information. And we've got multiple sources for that. So please contact us after the call today and engage us. We put together a pretty good team of people ahead of any type of a pilot to make sure that all the dots are on the I's and the crosses are on the T's. It makes for a very team approach. And yeah, let's do something together. Let's talk, chat, email, let's communicate. We invite that and welcome that at the end of our call today.
Great. Thank you so much, Daniel. And Mauricio, the next question is for you from Shauna. Does Predictive Coach also have training, or is that something separate?
Yes, so the Predictive Coach is, in fact, 3 types of training that we cover the whole scope, right? The first one is going to be the trigger training that we mentioned, where it's immediately triggered and immediately assigned. That's one basis that we cover. We also cover the monthly training to all drivers across the organization, because there are going to be those bad apples that didn't quite break the company threshold, whether it was 2 infractions instead of 3. But we still want to be proactive, right? We want to be able to have documentation. So our program does include a monthly training to all drivers and also a once-a-year comprehensive training. So all of that is included from the trigger training to monthly trainings and annual comprehensive, all of which are developed in-house, and we own all that content.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Great. Well, that concludes the Q&A section of our today. We greatly appreciate the time that everyone has spent with us. I want to say a thank you again to Daniel Lee, to John, to Mauricio for helping us come on and explain all of our solutions to our clients. Again, remember, contact@transflo.com or contact your Transflo rep if you have any questions that we can answer for you. Thank you so much to everyone, and have just a wonderful day.